Good evening. We'll start off with a capital Tilim. I'd like to mention particularly Dvar Leah Bas Esther Henna, for our first Lema. Kapitel Chof. Nasiach Mizmil David, Ya'ancha Adonai V'Yen Sora, Sagev Hashem Elohe Yaakov, Yishlach Ezra Chamikodesh, Mitzion Yisadecha, Yizkar Kol Min Chesecha V'Ilosecha Yirash Nesela. Yitin Lochachal Bavecha, V'chal Atzosecha Yimale, Neranana B'Yishuasecha, V'Shem Eloheinu Nidgel, Yimale Adonai Kol Mishalesecha, Atu Yodati, Ki Yeshia Adonai Mishichoi, Ya'anehu Mishmei Kodshe B'Gvuras Yeshe Yeminoi, Eile V'Orechev V'Eile V'Asusim V'Anachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Nazkir. Hey Makora Uvenafolo V'Anachnu Kamnu V'Anis Oidod, Adonai Yeshia HaMelech Ya'aneinu V'Yen Koreinu. Okay. So let's start the shir. I want to start off with something with a dover hachaviv, special excitement for myself. You have sometimes something which you've known about for many, many years, and then something is discovered. And everyone, I'm sure, is familiar with the story that the Rebbe's father, Reb Leivik, was preparing to be able to become the Rav in a prominent city, and it turned out to be Yekaterinoslav, now called Dnepropetrovsk, and he needed to have smicha from prominent Veltasher Rabbonim, and he was advised to go to Reb Chaim Brisk. Went to Reb Chaim Brisk in Reb Chaim Soloveitchik in Brisk, and Reb Chaim had this minhag that he wasn't going to give him an easy ride, knowing where he comes from, whatever it was. He gave him a tough ride, but then he had a minhag that the tough questions which would come in to the Rav, so he would say to the candidate for smicha, he should pass him. And it turned out that someone asked a shaila that they had forgotten. It was Sukkot and it was Shabbos, and they'd forgotten to make an eruv. The question was whether what should they do? It's Friday night, Shabbos, and they want to eat in the sukkah, but there's no eruv. When exactly this happened, I looked in the calendar. Rebbe Leivik got a brocha from the Rebbe Rashab, Tofresh Chanukah Tofresh Samach Zayin. So the Rebbe was 5 years old at the time. He becomes Rav in Yekaterinoslav Tofresh Samach Tes. And this story happened Sukkot time. So it was either Sukkot Samach Tes or Sukkot Samach Tes. The difference is that Sukkot Samach Tes, the first night of Sukkot, was Shabbos, which would make this question so much more interesting, because the first night of Sukkot is a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah. It's not just optional, and you could have the question of whether the chiyuv to eat in the sukkah is doiche the midrabanan of carrying without an eruv. So I don't know. And the Rebbe never emphasized that point when he told the story. Just the question was, want to eat in the sukkah, and there's no eruv. And Reb Leivik gives this answer that the sukkah alone is the eruv. The sukkah itself is the eruv, and Reb Chaim Brisker liked this and was impressed, etc. The Rebbe told the story in numerous times, numerous occasions. And what's happened now is we've got this manuscript, which if you can read Russian and you can turn your head to the side, you'll see the note paper says address для Piset, whatever. It says Nikolaev, and it says Echa Althaus. So Eliochaim Althaus was a very close friend of the Rebbe's family, and it's written in his stationery. So this piece of paper is written around. It's kind of discussing this point. The first and last paragraphs are written by someone else. We don't know who it is, but the middle seems to be Reb Leivik's writing. So, and it's about this topic about the sukkah being the eruv. So the hunch is that Reb Leivik perhaps discussed this with someone around then, and this person writes his suggestion to Reb Leivik, how to paskin. Reb Leivik makes a comment on this person's comment, and then this person sums up. So I'm going to go through this quickly with you, although it's interessant. He writes, I didn't expect you to be able to decipher the writing on the screen. He says, I've looked into the topic and I've tried, I've put some effort in. I think I know the answer to the question. I can't hold myself back to tell me my imagination of the solution. That I think it's lechatchila that you can carry to the sukkah on this Shabbos, in the chotzer where several people live. If all the people are sharing the one sukkah, because during Sukkot we are obliged, Torah obliges us to forsake our home and to dwell in the sukkah. He makes his home as being a temporary dwelling, and the sukkah becomes the permanent dwelling. So all the people who are using the one sukkah, it's as if they've all merged, fused into one dwelling. As a result, they've kind of dropped their personal dwellings. Then he goes on to another path. So the personal dwellings are like tents in the field. We have a din of people who are traveling as a caravan, which is a traveling caravan. And they stop for Shabbos. So the camp of caravans don't need to make a native, because the tents are very much temporary dwellings. As they are merged, they are combined, and he gives a reference to this din of the people traveling to Siman Shin Samach Vav Siv Beis. So this is the first paragraph. Let's go back. That's this writing over here, which we don't know who the writer is, but he seems to be suggesting to Reb Leivik, possibly Reb Leivik told him the story, and he says, "Oh, I've got an answer to the mystery." Reb Leivik responds to him, "Shiniso sidrei breishis. You've taken an awkward line of writing, etc. The normal way of dealing with matters is you first present perhaps the less comfortable approach, and then you present the more sound approach. But you've done the opposite. Because your opening comments, where you said that the sukkah is a permanent dwelling in comparison to the dwelling, the homes are temporary. That's on the mark, pretty good. But then you veered off the straight path. Perhaps in Isra, in the Shivcha, perhaps tomorrow he hopes to discuss it further. So this is Reb Leivik's comment, which you see there in the Ksav Yad. I actually took a letter of Reb Leivik in manuscript to try to compare, and it's reasonably similar. So it fits. It was written in Nikolai, presumably. So it all seems to tie in. Then the correspondent with Reb Leivik writes, he says, I found a clear solution. Sukas hachag b'chag eino chashuv diro lesser. He goes into another thing about the sukkah not being a dwelling to create a problem, and he refers to Simashin Ayin Ikar Dir Sa'odam Mekay Machila Sapis. So we're having here something very interesting. where you have Reb Leivik is commenting on someone's comment, and he's not happy with the second approach. I don't know whether I want to go into the whole lomdus over here. I'll just want to say the following. There was a question in Melbourne going back about 50 years ago. And at the time, the Rov in the Adas Kehila was Reb Betzalel Stern. There were two brothers. There was the Debreciner Rov, who was in Borough Park, Reb Moshe Stern, Be'er Moshe, and he had a brother, Reb Betzalel, who later was moved to Vienna. And the question was the following, that you have a block of flats, and there are a number of Yidden there. For some reason, they couldn't make a kosher Erev, possibly because there were non-frum Yidden in the complex. And they had several sukkahs, not one sukkah, but several sukkahs. And the Debreciner, the Reb Betzalel Stern, the Betzalel Chochmah, he takes the approach that Sukkahs HaChag B'Chag, Eine Chashuv Adira, means you don't need an Erev and Sukkahs. Because you're not living in the sukkah, you're not living in the house, you're living in the sukkah, and the sukkah itself is not a proper dwelling. So the whole din of Eruv Chatzeris is not needed on sukkahs if all the people are using sukkahs. So there was two sukkahs. I've gone into this in detail. I'm not going to go through all of it now. That I think is off mark. The word of Sukkah Sachag B'Chag Eino Chashuv Adira means that every member who is using this shared area has to contribute to the Eruv. If someone is not a member of this chotzer by virtue of a home, he just has parked a sukkah there for sukkahs. That presence of a sukkah doesn't require that he has to contribute to the Eruv. It does not mean, however, that the sukkah is not a dwelling. The nafkamina would be, can you place the loaf of the Eruv, the box of matzah, can that be placed in the sukkah? According to the Betzalel Chochmah's approach, he's saying the sukkah is not called a dwelling, and it's not eligible for the whole concept of Eruv. And that doesn't seem to be correct. The Pri Megadim, quoted by the Mishnah Brura, has an issue of needing to make an Eruv to carry from one sukkah to the other. That's clearly opposite of what the Betzalel Chochmah is saying, that sukkahs you don't need to have an Eruv. And this seems to be what this fellow is writing towards the end of his comment, his last comment. Sukkahs HaChag is not needed, don't need an Eruv, and I don't think he's right. And the difference is, when there's two sukkahs, if you say you don't need an Eruv in sukkahs, say if there's two sukkahs, 5 sukkahs, there's no need for an Eruv. If you say you do need an Eruv in sukkahs, but the sukkah is the Eruv, then only if they are all eating in one sukkah, then that the sukkah becomes the Eruv. Another point is that if Reb Leivik's solution, which we're dealing with, is only if there aren't single ladies, could be a widow or something, living in that complex in her own flat, then this whole solution wouldn't work because she doesn't have a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah. At any rate, just I wanted to share with you this. For me, it was a big excitement to see this Ksav Yad, which surfaced from, it must have been around Tofresh Samach Ches. So it's over 113 years since this was written and became shared with the tzibur. Okay. I want to share with you also something. We had this discussion a couple of weeks ago. It was actually Shabbos Chazoin, learning about Beis Hamikdash, and I shared with you this picture of the Kohanim saying Shema in Lishkas Hagozis. And this is on the Mishnah, based on the Mishnah in Tomid, where it says after they had placed they had a whole train of 9 people, I think, or 9 Kohanim, bringing up stuff up to the Mizbeach, the organs of the animal, etc. And they put them halfway up the Mizbeach, halfway up the ramp to the Mizbeach. They then come to Lishkas Hagozis, to the chamber of hewn stone, that's how they translate it. And if you can look at the screen here at the bottom, where the red arrow is, that's approximately where this chamber was. And they read the Shema. So he has this picture, and the Lishkas Hagozis was Chetzia Bakoidesh, Chetzia Bachoil. The mundane part was where the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Sanhedrin sat. That's the Chetzia Bachoil. Chetzia Bakoidesh is where the Kohanim would do their pious every day. They would put their hands out to what we call in English dipping, in Old English, yeah, childish. We should dip. I don't remember the ditty about it. And so my problem was, how could they be sitting here if it's got the Kedushas HaZorah? They're not ein yeshiva ba'azorah. They're not allowed to sit here. So I wrote to the publisher of this, the origin of this drawings from Mechon HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. I wrote to them about this. How could they have this picture of the Kohanim sitting, not allowed to sit, in the outer part of the Lishkas HaGozis? He wrote back to me, one of the members there, that the Kohanim sat in the inner part, in the Chelek HaChoil, in the outer part, the part which is the Chelek HaChoil. So I said, but my problem is that on your picture, it says, the English writing says, praying in the holy part of the Supreme Court chamber. So they were in the Chelek HaKodesh, they're not allowed to sit there. Plus I had a taina that the picture, if you look through the door, you can see the Mizbeach, which means the Chelek HaKodesh, it's the part closer to the Azorah. He writes back, no, it wasn't, they said Shema in the Chelko Shel Choil. And okay, so the English inscription here is incorrect. No, making some progress. But then I said, why are you insisting that they said Shema in the inner part, or the Chelka in the mundane part, in the Choil part? Why don't you say that they said the Krishma standing? I mean, you have to justify the picture. So this was my correspondence. So he says that they said the Shema in Chelek Choil, and they said the Shema sitting. Afterwards, I checked up, and I saw he's right. That some Meforshim point out that the Shema was said in the Chelek HaChoil. Why? Question is, they've just done they've been doing the Avodah somewhere in the Azorah. Why do you have to schlep all of these Kohanim to the Lishkas HaGozis to say Shema? Why can't they just stand where they are? So I saw two pirushim. One pirush is, the Lishkas HaGozis is the Supreme Beis Din. This is the seat of Torah. It's important to connect Tefillah with Torah. Shema is like perhaps one of the epitomes of Tefillah, especially perhaps the Daven Shemon Esrei. Also, I don't remember the detail then. Lishkas HaGozis is the supreme seat of Torah. It was important to bring the Tefillah to the Mokim Torah. That's why they came to the Lishkas HaGozis. And Dafka then in the Chelek HaChoil, where the Sanhedrin would sit, and the Sanhedrin weren't in the session first thing in the morning, so therefore they said the Shema there. But then I saw in the Encyclopedia Talmudis, he gives a reference to a journal called HaPoisek. It says a fascinating chap. We know that there's a machloikas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, where the Shema should be said standing or sitting or lying, b'shach b'chov k'mechad, the Mishnah in Brachas, everyone's familiar. Beis Shammai says that Shema by night should be said b'shach b'chov, laying down. And Shema by day in the morning should be said standing over kubecha. And Beis Hillel says, no, it doesn't have to be in the whole minor story of Reb Tarfon, it's a counter batsman. If the Koyanim was seen to be saying Shema in the Azorah standing, what would the onlookers say? The halacha is like Beis Shammai. The Beis Shammai that the Krishma has to be said standing. So Dafka, they schlepped the Kohanim away from the Azorah into the Chelek HaChoil of the Lishkas HaGozis, so that they should be able to be seated, so that it should be become known to a degree at least that the halacha is like Beis Hillel, or at least not to give the impression that halacha is like Beis Shammai. Someone's asking about the Kohanim wearing red belts. Guta Shaila. And there's a whole discussion whether Avneitis shel Kohen Gadol, who Avneitis shel Kohen Hedyot. I don't remember the whole sugya. What I do want to say to you is that I read a Maimah in Likutei Torah this week. It's in Parshas Tazria, Lamnatseach ala Shminis, and he talks about the Bris Milah being on the 8th day, and he talks about the 4 and 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei and Adni, and the 4 and 4 make up the 8. And then he says also the 8 begodim of the Kohen Gadol is a combination of Big Day Lov, of 4 Big Day Lov and a 4 Big Day Zohov. So according to that cheshbon, well, you got the tzitz, the choshen, the ephod, and the me'il, which had the golden belt. So they all were Big Day Zohov. So that leaves the avnate is one of the 4 Big Day Lovon. So we'll have to leave that for another time. Okay. Let's move on. You know what? We zal zeggen zijn, we zeggen Zeno Inenu, and we'll see the Kernim, whether in the inner, in the Chelik HaChoy, the Chelik HaKodesh. You have to let us in to see. Okay. No, I was talking. Why was I reading up this mimer about La Masech and Ashminis? We had a bris on, I think it was Monday this week, and I was a Sandik, and so I was sitting next to the Moil, who was given, is a Polisher, Chosid, for many, many years, and he was given the privilege of benching a la kos. So he asked me to lift the kos and put it on his hands, on his 2 hands, and as he's doing so, he says, Havelon v'nivrich. So I said, oh, that's interesting. Havelon v'nivrich. It means to give us the kos, and we'll make the bracha. So I start thinking, what's this? I wanted to know a little bit more about this minhag of putting on the hands, etc. So now first we have a brais. We have a brais in Brochus, which says, Asora dvorim nemru bekois shel bracha, and it's got a list which is brought also in Shulchan Aruch and Alter Rebbe, I think it's Kuf Sadik Beis, which he says you have to rinse it and you wear a jacket, wear a iter of a hat and jacket. That's how we do it, instead of wearing a cloak. And noitli b'shtei yodov, you take the kos, hold it in 2 hands. Then v'noisne biyamin. Now that's the Girsa. The Gemara is noitli b'shtei yodov. The Girsa in the Rosh is mekabloi b'shtei yodov. That's the background to this, and this is now you have a quote in here, Zion from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, mekabloi b'shtei yodov, that you accept the cup with your 2 hands, laharois chavivus hakois, to show how you're cherishing this privilege of benching with a cup of wine. So there's this idea of taking it with both hands, and then when you actually bench, you hold it in your right hand, not with both hands, otherwise it will look like it's a burden for you. So meanwhile, what we're seeing here is there is an inyan of Mekabel b'shtei yod. Then we have, this is one quote from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. The other quote is also from Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, which says, "Bezoyar chmiru loima befiv koidim birchas hamozoin tein lonu hakoisu nevorich." So the Zohar says this thing of the havlon v'nivrich. Now, so the word have, like the word in Hebrew hovo, it can mean give. It can mean like hovon is chakmaloi. Let's deal with it. Havlon, till that's how I always understood till now. Havlon v'nivrich. Let's bench. Let's go get on with it. So the one taich of la havlon v'nivrich is tein lonu hakois v'nevorich. Give us the cup. Give us the cup and we'll bench. Oy boyu nevorich, or havlon v'nivrich can mean let's bench. And then it goes on. What's the idea is, because obviously Kedusha needs to have a gearing up, a preparation. So we have this zimun. We're gearing up to bench. All right. So this is the background of this minhag of mekabli b'shtei yodov, of saying that someone else places it on his hands. It's got, good sources for this minhag of placing on 2 hands. But then comes the question of the other way around. Then why in Chabad is it not followed? So in your notes you could see from the Yavitz, Yankiv Emden says Lashon of the Gemara is not mashma. So the Lashon of the Gemara is noitloi. It's the girsa of the Rosh of Mekabloi, which is more indicative of someone else passing to you. The Yavitz also says that in the Zohar it's also not so muchrich. You don't have to. It's not you can read it both ways. The Yankiv Emden suggests there's a difference. If you are an oirich So then there's someone who's in charge, who is kind of giving you the cost, is honoring you the cost. But if you are the balabos, who's going to give you the cost? I mean, you're in charge. I mean, what do you mean? Someone should give you? What's the pshat? They're not authorized to give you. That doesn't make sense. All right, so we've got here these two sides. And then this is now shtickle in the Haggadah, which has by Kadesh, Minag Beis Harav, Moisgin HaKois, Ve'em Medaktikim Sheyimzig Acher. Der Welt has a minhag that say the night. There are chedus, you have someone else waiting on you who pours the wine for you. In Beis Harav, that wasn't done. But then it goes, the rest is relevant the whole year round. You take the cup in your right hand, you lift it with your right hand, pass it to the left hand, mamidoi, and then you place it down on your right hand with your left hand. You lower it with your left hand onto your palm, al kaf yodas, yumonis onto your right palm. And the right palm is, your right hand is cupped like a container. The four fingers are raised up. V'hagudol mushkov minatzad, and the thumb is horizontal on the side. So it's your cup has become like your kaf hayad has become like a cup of sorts. And then he says you make kiddush standing, and the koyus is 3 tefachim above the table, and the chol zehu gam b'shari meis hashad. I'm not sure whether the chol zeh also relates to ve'ei medakdekim sheyimzig acher. I don't know whether there is any such minhag. The chol is referring to the rest of the minhag, but there we are. That this idea of shtei yodo, we are mekayim by lifting it in the right hand and passing to the left hand. That is how we are mekayim. The inyan of mekable b'shtei yodo or noitle b'shtei yodo, although possibly mekable b'shtei yodo seems to be more literal, like the Velta Sheminik, the Polish Sheminik. Okay, so much for that. And as we say always, nahar or pashte. There's different minhagim, different kilos, and everything has got a beautiful mocker. Okay, so now question number 4 is that someone asked me last year, and I'm using this forum because there are people are hearing recordings. Someone pointed out to me that in a certain community, children, boys under bar mitzvah were offered an incentive that they would do so and such, and they'd be given a set of arba minim for mipsoim. Now, that raises a problem. That there is and I'm using this forum that if you know someone who's doing this kind of program, to raise this question, and they should ask Rabbonim in their town how to deal with it. The first day and the first 2 days of Sukkot, there's a din of shalochem, lokachtem lochem. It has to be your own arba minim. There is a din that is preferable, it's recommended. Koton sheyadeh l'na'anea oviv koineloi arba minim. A father should buy for his son arba minim. Years when we were kids, that wasn't happening because it was very rare, very expensive to get arba minim. Baruch Hashem, today many people are able to afford, and many people do buy arba minim for their children. That avoids the question of the child making a broch on arba minim and they're not lochem. The first 2 days there has to be lochem. So if you want to give a boy a matona, arba minim should be his, no problem. Very good, very nice, and lochem. But if you want him to do mivsoim, he can. Al halacha doesn't recognize the ability of a child to be makne, to give away. A child can be koine, cannot be makne. So if a child would be going around with a communal esrog, which is not his, and giving it to people, this is a communal esrog, he's like just like the table in shul, people would pick it up and put it down, that's okay possibly. But for the child to give his own arba minim to people on the first 2 days of Sukkot doesn't work. And so I just want to use this forum to raise that problem, and I think it shouldn't be done. Okay, let's go on. Now someone sent me this picture. Afterwards, I was told that this is the logo of Starbucks, but perhaps I shouldn't show it. It's fascinating to have pictures from Viber and Shir. Okay, Al Kaponim. So the question is that this apparently reacts to heat. And when you pour hot water, it changes into this mug, it'll change from red to green or from green to red, whatever it may be. So are you allowed to use this mug on Shabbos? So at first I thought it was the picture which was coming out. And then the person said, no, the picture is there the whole time. It's the mug which changes colors. So this relates to the question of wearing photo gray lenses, etc. Now, there's a difference between the mug, if the picture changes, and if the mug changes. If the mug changes color, that's not really a problem. It's not a davar hamiskayim, and like the photo gray lenses is not such a problem. Perhaps it should be avoided, but as a chumrah, but it's not such a problem. But if the picture comes out, then it is an inyan of ksav she'eina miskayim. For example, if you've got condensation on the window, you're not allowed to write with your finger on the, I was here or something on Shabbos. The ksav she'eina miskayim. You're not allowed to write in sand, to write whatever message you want, even though after a few minutes it won't last. It's a ksav she'eina miskayim. You're not allowed to do ksav she'eina miskayim. A temporary script is also forbidden on Shabbos. I haven't seen them in years. There used to be these celluloid strips as thermometers. So at that time, the psak was that if it just changes colors, that wouldn't be a problem to use them on Shabbos. But if it's going to bring up a number, 38, 39, whatever it may be, to bring out a number, that would be bringing to forth a ksav she'eina miskayim, which shouldn't be done on Shabbos. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so one of our regular listeners asked me to explain what is this saying Ba'avrom Zokin after Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. So now Erev Rosh Chodesh, as Hashem, Shabbos and Sunday, it'll be Negeah. So what you have in front of you is the Sefer Mishnas Chasidim, written by Rebbe Menuach Chayriki, who is a Talmud of the Arizal, and in Chabad, we have Masorah from the Alter Rebbe, very, very great credence given to the Mishnas Chasidim. The Alter Rebbe is saying that whatever he says is from the Arizal. So although by the Sfardim, they have a different tradition and they see the Mishnas Chasidim may have some things from other sources, but in Chabad, this is considered a very, very authentic source. So now he writes the following: in order that you should live long, after Hallel at Rosh Chodesh, you'll say the posuk Ba'avrom Zokim Bo Bayomim Ba'Hashem Be'echas B'rom B'Kel. Then he says like this: look at the word Zokein. Think of the Zayin of Zokein as if it was with a Shavo. Then the word Bo. So imagine the base of Bo has got a comets. Then think of the word of the letter Dalet. The Dalet is going to switch for the Mem in Bayomim. So then you've got a Dalet. And that Dalet is with a Shvo. Because Dalet and Mem interchange. Singles, units, singles, tens, hundreds. And then you've got Yud-K, then you've got the Yud-K of Hashem's name, of Yud-K Vav K, again with a Shvo. How we do Shvo, Hey comets. He anigud atzmoi the Vav Ke Dehavai. So by this cheshbon, so then you have spelt out in your mind the name Zavod Yudke. Nokud benikud Yehovcho. The Zavod Yudke with the same vowels as Yehovcho. Yehovcho is Shvo Komets, Shvo Komets. And if you take the Nikudas, Shemisporoi Chesed. Now I don't know whether we've discussed this before. In Kabbalah, you have a gematria of nekudas. Every dot is a yud is 10. Every line is a vav is 6, and a comet, which is a line and a dot, equals 16. And so shvo comets. You got 4 dots. 2 shvo is 4 dots. That's 40. Then you've got 2 comets, which is 16, and 16 equals 32. 40 and 32 equals ayin base. Shemisporei chesed. So the nikud of Yehovcha is 72. And so it's taking the word Zavod Yudke and having this cheshbon of Shvol Komet. You have the cheshbon, the remes of chesed, and then we have Zvodya Yishmereini V'Chayein. Then we have that in. So this is where this comes from. This minig of saying, "It's posuk on Rosh Chodesh," as just after you've said Hallel, and it's a segula for Arichas Yomim, and the word Zvod Yudke. I know in some Sidurim they've printed the name Zvadio. Zvadio is the name of a particular individual. It's mentioned Divrei Yomim, but that does not fit at all over here. It actually is the union of one of like these shemus which we have, Zvod Yudke, that the word Zeved means a burden or a package. Zeved Yudke, the Eibishter carries my package. And that's why he uses the remes to the word Yehovcha. Hashlich alahem Shem Yehovcha. Cast your burden on Hashem. So this is the remes over here, Zeved Yudke, and it's got to do with, as we see, it's a skula. By saying this every Rosh Chodesh, it's a skula for a bracha for Arichas Yomim, because that's the posuk of Avram Zokin Bo Bayomim. That Avram is aging and with Hashem's bracha. Hashem Bechs Avram Bakhay. So that's the background to this. And if you see the Hasidah with the annotated version, they're actually Zvod. The name Zvod is actually spelt with Kometson rather than with a Pasach, which, as I say, I don't think is accurate. Okay. Also, I was asked last week, we discussed about spaghetti bolognese, and I don't know whether you heard the recording or not. And the way I understood was the spaghetti is the roiv, and there's a bit of bits of meat, minced meat mixed in, and I'd said that the bracha would be mezonos because the main thing is the lokshin, and in any case, mezonos in a mixture becomes the dominant feature. Okay. So then the person asks, what about, how does this fit with ice cream cones, where the wisdom used to be that you don't make a bracha on the on the cone, you only make a bracha on the ice cream. So the obvious difference between the two is when you're eating spaghetti bolognese, you are the fairish interested in having the carbs of the lokshin, of the spaghetti, and the meat is like you have meat, a little bit of protein together with carbs. By the ice cream cone, the ikki is for sure the ice cream is ice cream, and the cone is just like a holder. However, I may have sounded a little bit glib over there about, and what's happened is that whereas back in the day, the wafers for ice cream were pretty bland. I don't know if you remember, Snowcrest had these 10 thin wafers in a packet, and you had a slice of ice cream, and you put them between two wafers, and it was dripping all over. Those wafers were pretty bland. Of late, the cones seem to be quite sweetened. They have their own yichus, and that has changed the psak. And that's what he's writing over here in the Piskei Teshuva. It's glida begavia. I wouldn't have guessed that. How do I know that to say a gavia is the word for a cornet? Okay, so glida begavia or bebiscuit mishnei tzida glida, or that's an ice cream biscuit. And he says you should make a bracha on the biscuit, on the mezonos, and on the ice cream. And in the note underneath he says, "Ka'amur lacharoino mutzar gavia glida biscuite hakrembo." This is a new word. If you're learning Ivrit, there's something called a krembo. It means there's something which has got cream inside. But often shehemut omim, they make the wafers, the wafer part of the ice cream cones, etc., are tasty in their own right. And therefore, there would nowadays the guidance would be to make a bracha mezonos on the bit of cone and shahakal on the ice cream subsequently. Okay. That's the background to this. Now, the person also asked about clarifying the story with cheesecake and cream cake. And I must confess, there's Loshen Bo Lamed V'Lim Salomed. I discovered something which I did not know till now, and that is that there's a difference. Well, let's deal with first with the cheesecake. Cheesecake is beferish mezonos because it's baked together. The cream, the cheese content is baked together with the base. I'm not sure whether there's a bit of flour also mixed in with the cheese. Be that as it may, it's baked together. Therefore, it's a single food, and you'd make mezonos on it. Shala would be like Gabi Brocha Achrona, which we can discuss separately. But by contrast, a cream cake, where you got thin slices of cake and loads of cream. So this is what you have over here. This is from Rabbi Alashvili's, Avram Alashvili has put out several editions of Seder Birchas Hanenin, and there's a list of brachas at the back. So ugo in katzefes, so that's a cake with cream, which is not, the cream is not baked with it, the cream has been added later. So he says, make a shahakal on the cream, and then mazonos on the cake. I never knew that, because I was always, the way I was taught was, cream cake is all right, so you make a bracha on the cake, and it's all mazonos. So he's saying, no, because the cream is such a significant component, you should be making a shahakal on the cream and separately mazonos. It's interesting why he makes the seder that he does, to do first shahakal and then mazonos, which I'm not sure why. Possibly that's just the logistics, because you can't get to the mazonos without getting to the cream. I'm not sure. And he's saying the same thing as the Piskei Teshuvos, where he's saying ugat katzefes ukrem she'ima mili bekamus nikeres v'chashuva la'atzmo. You should make mazonos on the uga, on the cake, and a separate shahakal on the filling. If it's only a little bit of cream, then you don't make a bracha on the cream, because it's bottled too. Like no one makes a bracha on the jam in a jam sandwich. And so, but this is something new to me. That I see both Rabbi Alashvili and the Piskei Teshuvos, whoever his sources are, they're saying that the bracha for cream cake is actually two brachas, which is news to me. Okay, beautiful. Mendel Safran's pointing out, and then Shaila Moira Siddur also has Vodya with the comments. Yeah, listen, he's done a very good, he's a very good researcher, Weinfeld. Fine. Let's move on. Then, mitzvah gereres mitzvah, talking about brachas. So then what about soup containing vegetables and lokshin, which are clearly identifiable which bracha? So if the lokshin is cooked separately, then it does not dominate the soup. We've gone through this before when we were talking about the croutons of the whole saga. Lokshin, which is in a soup, and the lokshin is cooked separately, you'd have to make a separate bracha on the lokshin, a separate bracha on the soup. And the fact that there's vegetables, I don't know how regular is it to actually cook vegetables and lokshin. Then that if you cook the vegetables and the lokshin all together, so then the whole lot becomes mazonos. But if you made a vegetable soup, and the vegetable soup is a ha'adoma, because you're eating the soup with pieces, diced vegetables, then the bracha on the soup is ha'adoma, and the lokshin, which was cooked separately, would have a separate bracha, which of very minimum mazonos. Hope that answers the question, and let's go on. So now, question number 10. So someone called me from somewhere in Europe, and they have a canal near where they are, with the holidays, whatever it may be. There's a canal, and they ask whether they can tovel kalim in the canal. So when people ask about toveling kalim in a river, one of the questions you have to know is there a dam upstream? Because if there's an electricity dam upstream, then that could disqualify the water in the river, because the dam is a keli and it becomes all shu'uvim. But here in this case, it doesn't seem to be the case. There may be some locks, but there's no dam. It's just a canal, but seawater. So then I was thinking, I had to think about to refresh my memory. Does seawater have to be static, or can it also be flowing? To explain, there's a difference between mayim chayim and rainwater. Rainwater has to be mikveh, which means it has to be standing. And we all know the headaches which we have. If a mikveh develops a leak, then it disqualifies the mikveh, because the term is zoichalin, the water is crawling away, it's flowing. A leaking mikveh is possible. So rainwater in a river If it's just rainwater, that is possible for Tvila. So if you go on holidays in the mountains and there's a mountain river and it's mamish beautiful, it's gushing down, and you find out that this is because, why is it gushing down? Because at the top of the mountain there's snow. And as the snow melts, it gushes down the mountain. This is a posel mikveh. A mountain stream which is made from melted snow is posel mikveh. It's a toivel kalim in the snizge toivel. It's not a kosher mikveh. If it were a lake, which is standing, that would be okay. Here's a canal, and he says the water is flowing. It's not mayim chayim because it's salty, but that's okay because this seawater, although it doesn't have the darga, the level of mayim chayim, but the fact that it's flowing does not disqualify it. Rainwater which is flowing is posel for a mikveh. Seawater which is flowing, as in the case of this canal, is kosher, although for things which the Torah prescribes mayim chayim, for tfilas hazav, azov, etc., whatever, tfilas hazav, not zov. So seawater would not be okay. It'd have to be drinkable fresh water. But for tfilas kalim, or for that matter, if someone needs to use it for themselves, they would be able to toivel in a canal of seawater. Let's go on to the next point. Someone asked also to explain about the minhag of the Rebbe when he would come down into the shul and he would touch the paroches and then not kiss it and then walk over to his place and on the way out also. No, Bichlal, when it comes to talking about the Rebbe, is ilu yadaitiv heyisif. Yeah, I mean we can only just speculate, and we should speculate because as chassidim we should use our seichel as well as our midas in his kashrus. So it's something we should it's every pu'ula, every tenu of a Rebbe is something which we should think about, but doesn't mean we know. All right, bepashtus, and when the Rebbe davened upstairs in the small shul, he would daven. You know, I'm talking about when he came in for Kriyas HaTorah Mondays and Thursdays. He didn't pass by the Aron Kodesh, and he didn't go over to the Aron Kodesh to touch it. It was when he came downstairs. He went past the Aron Kodesh, then he would fondle, if that's the right word, the paroches as if to show reverence to the Aron Kodesh. That's as much as I can say. What I do want to share with you though is here we have the from Shulchan Aruch Hichas Mezuzah, beginning with Hichas Mezuzah, and it says where you should place the mezuzah, and then the Ramah writes, Yesh oimrim k'she'odam yotzim la'bayis yaniach yodel ha'mezuzah. A person, as he leaves the home, he should put his hand on the mezuzah, and he should say, Hashem yishmer tzeisi v'avoyi me'atav ad olam, based upon Tilim Kuf Chaf. He should say a pasuk that Hashem should protect me. So he puts his hand on the mezuzah and says, Hashem protect me. V'chein k'she'ikonas ad lebeis bayis, when you come into your home, yaniach yodel ha'mezuzah. Personally, I don't always say the pasuk Hashem yishmer tzeisi, but certainly when I'm going on a journey. So if I'm have the presence of mind, I'd put my hand on the mezuzah and say Hashem yishmer tzeisi v'avoyi me'atav ad olam, as we have in the Shulchan Aruch. It doesn't say in the Shulchan Aruch to kiss the mezuzah. And if you look in Malachtim, there's a whole thing whether yes or no, whether it is does the kedusha of the mezuzah transfer to your fingers? That you, when you're kissing your fingers, you've kissed the mezuzah. That's the part of the discussion, and there's different in Malachtim. They bring both ways. I heard a story, I don't remember now, I heard a story years ago about the Baal Shem Tov passing by and putting his hand on the mezuzah, not kissing, and then they checked the mezuzah, it was possible, or something like that. The Rebbe did not kiss the mezuzah. The Rebbe would touch the mezuzah. He did, as it says in Shulchan Aruch, Yaniach Yodel HaMezuzah. You can see it. It's also, I have a sefer called Masi Melech, which has describing the Rebbe's Hanhogis, and the Rebbe's minhag was not to kiss the mezuzah, it was just to touch it, as it says in Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so that might explain one part of the Hanhogi of touching the paroches. It's an expression of chibo, but not kissing would be. So we have this source. Okay. Finally, last year we had a discussion about Lichtzinden and how the Weltische minhag is to have Lichtzinden 14 minutes before sunset, Chabad of 18 minutes before sunset, And I mentioned last week that the Rebbe is quoted from Reb Leibel Grona that the Rebbe said that by uns event of a poshet of 25 minutes, and I gave I showed on the screen last week that Reb Wolf Greenglass in his Likutei Dinim, he has a ha'ora at the bottom, yesh noeg in 23 minutes. And I was intrigued, where does this 23 minutes come from? So I've mentioned the name before, Rabbi Zirkin in Western Florida, Adim of the late Rabbi Sion Hacknell of Shalom. So he wrote to me, I think it's brilliant. The source for having a margin of 18 minutes or 14 minutes is before sunset, is Rebbe Elazar Mimetz, because the Shir of Ben Hashmoshes, which is mentioned in Gemara Shabbos, is the time it takes to walk 3/4 of a mil. Goinim put it the first piece right after Shkia. Rebbeinu Tam has it later. Rebbe Elazar Mimetz says it's 3/4 of a mil before sunset. So if a mil takes 18 minutes to walk, so 3/4 is 13.5. That's the Velta Sheminiga, 14 minutes before sunset. If a mil takes 24 minutes to walk, so then 3/4 of that is 18. That's the source of the Chabad minute of 18 minutes before sunset. Oh, now here comes, now you're ready. We've gone through this before, which I don't know why I never chapsach before, that we don't take the 72 minutes flat. We take the Shir and we translate it into 2 degrees. So now, the further north you are, so what takes 18 minutes closer to the horizon takes longer. When you translate into degrees, it's a longer. Can you call me in 5 minutes? So now, therefore, imagine you are close. You're now in Russia, in Rostov, or in Liadi, Nikolai, whatever it may be. So the 18 minutes becomes stretched. It possibly can stretch to close to 25 minutes. He sent me cheshbonos. Ein koichi yofer b'mathematika. I could just see numbers and but that's what he explained, that it's the idea of taking Rebbe Elazar Mimetz, the 3/4 of a mil, but translating it into degrees to 3 degrees before sunset, and that becomes can be in areas in Russia could be close to 25 minutes. So that's the source. So as I said before, so we learned 2 new things today about making 2 brachas and cream cakes. And now I know the source of the chumrah of having hadlokas neiros that much earlier than the 18 minutes. And hamachim tov of bracha. And I wish you all a good Shabbos. And get Chodesh Elul. And the avodah Elul should be avodah Shuvah, in of Simcha pairs together, and we should be zoiche to have a shona toiva mesuko shnas geula lanu l'chol bnei Yisrael chol mokem shahem alidei Moshiach Tzidkeinu. I'm going to stop the recording. Stop share. Stop recording. Oh.